The wind rustled through the bare branches of the park trees, their limbs swaying like slow dancers caught in grief. The sky was the color of ash, hanging low with a heaviness that mirrored Daniel Pierce's chest. He sat on the far end of a weathered wooden bench, one hand tucked inside his coat pocket, the other resting limply on his thigh. This bench, this park, it used to mean something. A year ago it was laughter and coffee cups, Sunday morning talks, and her cold fingers curled into his hand. Now it was silence. Now it was only his bench. Her absence stretched across the slats like a second shadow. Daniel exhaled and pulled his scarf tighter. His backslashed $4,000 coat didn't seem to hold warmth anymore. Neither did his high-rise penthouse or his titles or his boardrooms. Since Olivia died, nothing had. He didn't come here for peace. He came because this was where she once smiled at the ducks and told him stories about the children she wished they had. Now children passed him, but none ever stayed. Until today. "Can I sit here?" a small voice said. Daniel looked up, startled. A little girl in a mustard-yellow coat stood in front of him, her mittens mismatched, her hair pulled into two fluffy puffs. She clutched a worn plush rabbit with one hand and looked at him with eyes far too solemn for someone so young. "My dad's in heaven too," she added, quieter this time. "It's okay if you don't want to talk." Daniel blinked, something in his throat caught. She waited. He hesitated, then gave a small nod and scooted to the side. She climbed up beside him, her boots swinging over the edge, too short to touch the ground. The plush rabbit sat between them. For several long moments they said nothing. She looked out over the lake where ducks floated on gray water. Daniel followed her gaze. "I come here sometimes," she said suddenly. "Me and my aunt live over there." She pointed vaguely toward the row of apartment buildings that lined the park's east side. "But she works a lot, so I come sit with my daddy. I think he likes this place too." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. The girl dug into her coat pocket and pulled out a chocolate chip cookie, mostly whole, a little crumbled. She broke it in half and held out the larger piece to him. He shook his head gently. "I'm all right." She tilted her head. "You look like you need it more than I do." He wasn't sure if that was meant to be sweet or an insult, but something about it made his lips twitch, almost a smile. He accepted the cookie. They sat in silence again, chewing. "I'm Leela," she said after a while. "What's your name?" He paused. It felt strange to give his name. In his world, names came with weight, headlines, assumptions, press releases. But this little girl didn't know who he was, and that, for some reason, made it easier. "Daniel," he said. "Daniel," she repeated like she was testing how it tasted in her mouth. "You look like a Daniel." He almost chuckled, almost. Before he could respond, a frazzled voice called from across the path. "Leela, there you are." A young woman with tired eyes and wind-blown hair jogged toward them, grocery bags bumping against her legs. "I told you not to run off like that," she said, breathless as she reached the bench. Her voice was stern, but there was worry behind it. "I was just talking to Daniel," Leela said cheerfully. "He's nice." The woman turned to Daniel, eyes apologetic. "I'm so sorry. She wanders when she's thinking about her dad. I hope she wasn't bothering you." Daniel shook his head. She's a good conversationalist." The woman gave a small, polite smile. She didn't recognize him either, and that too brought him an odd comfort. "Come on, kiddo," she said gently. "Let's get home before the eggs freeze." Leela slid off the bench and looked up at Daniel. "Will you be here tomorrow?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Her face lit up. "Okay." She waved her mittened hand. "Bye, Mr. Lonely." He blinked. "What?" "That's what I called you before I knew your name," she said, skipping toward her aunt. "But I won't call you that anymore. You're not lonely if someone sits with you." Daniel sat motionless on the bench as they walked away. The park grew quiet again. He looked at the remaining half-cookie in his hand. Maybe she was wrong. But for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like she was. The next day, Daniel Pierce returned to the park bench, but this time not out of habit. He told himself it was just a walk, that the air was good for clearing his head, that his assistant's constant texts could wait, but deep down he knew the truth. He hoped the little girl with the solemn eyes and too big heart would be there again. She was. She arrived like she belonged there. skipping down the cracked sidewalk with her floppy-eared bunny under one arm and a bright green scarf trailing behind her. "You came back," she said, beaming as she climbed onto the bench. "You too," Daniel replied, adjusting the collar of his coat. Leela pulled something from her pocket again, a new cookie, this time shaped like a star. She broke it in half and offered it wordlessly. He hesitated, then accepted it with a small nod. Rituals, he realized, had power, even ones as simple as sharing a cookie. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The sounds of the city moved around them, distant horns, barking dogs, someone jogging by with earbuds in. But in their little corner of the world, there was only quiet. "I like this place," Leela said. "It's like the whole world forgets to be loud here." Daniel smiled faintly. "Your dad, did he like quiet places too?" She nodded. "He used to sit with me by the window during storms. He said thunder was just the clouds playing drums for angels." Daniel's throat tightened unexpectedly. "What about your wife?" Leela asked. Daniel froze. Children didn't ask with the same hesitance adults did. They weren't careful. They didn't wrap grief in soft words. "Yes," he said slowly. "She liked the noise, laughed at loud movies, danced in the kitchen to terrible music." Leela giggled. "I bet she had cool shoes." "She did," Daniel said, his voice softening. "She liked colors. Her sneakers were red once." Leela turned to look at him. "Do you think they're together, my daddy and your wife?" Daniel glanced down at her, surprised. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'd like to think so." They sat with that thought a moment longer, staring out at the ducks. A few minutes later, Maya arrived again, this time walking slower, not as panicked. She had traded the grocery bags for a small backpack and a thermos. Her hair was still messy, but her eyes didn't look as tired today. "Hi," she greeted Daniel, her voice cautious but kind. "Hello," he replied, standing politely. "I figured she'd find you here again," she said. "Sorry if she's a handful." "She's not," Daniel said, glancing at Leela, who was now feeding breadcrumbs to the ducks. "She's refreshing." Maya offered a small smile. "You don't meet many grown men who don't mind talking to little girls in parks." Daniel's mouth twisted into something close to a smirk. "I don't mind it, but I admit I don't seek it out either." "Well, she talks to angels, animals, and furniture, so you're in good company," Maya joked. They stood in companionable silence. Daniel glanced sideways at her. She looked like she worked too much, slept too little, and carried too many worries for one woman. "Are you her mother?" he asked. She shook her head. "Her aunt, I took her in when my sister passed. Leela was only 4. "I'm sorry," he said. "Me too," Maya whispered. There was something honest in that moment. No posturing, no pretense. Just two strangers carrying invisible losses. "Leela likes you," Maya said after a pause. "She doesn't open up to just anyone." "She said I looked lonely," Daniel murmured. Maya smiled gently. "She has a radar for lonely people, picks them out like pennies on the ground." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. "She gave me this yesterday," he said, handing it to Maya. It was a crayon drawing. Him on the bench, Leela beside him, a bunny in between, and a rainbow arcing over their heads. Above it, written in big block letters, "Not lonely bench anymore." Maya's eyes welled. "She drew this before bed last night." "She's got talent," Daniel said quietly. "She's got heart," Maya replied. "That's what keeps me going." They looked at Leela, who was now talking to a duck as if it were a long-lost friend. "Maybe we'll see you tomorrow," Maya said tentatively. Daniel glanced at his phone. The endless emails, the meetings, the soulless reports waiting for him. He looked back at Leela. "Yeah," he said, "same time." Maya nodded, "Same bench." As they walked away, Leela turned and waved wildly. "Bye, Mr. Daniel." He raised a hand. "Bye, Leela." And for the second time in 2 days, Daniel didn't feel quite so alone. By the end of the week, it wasn't a coincidence anymore. It was a routine. Each afternoon, Daniel Pierce left his glass tower of an office, ignoring meetings he once would have deemed essential, and headed to the old wooden bench in the park. A bench that, just days ago, had been a graveyard of memories. Now it felt like something else, something alive. Leela was always there first. She arrived like a comet, talking to squirrels, skipping stones near the pond, or drawing with chalk on the sidewalk. Her energy filled the space before Daniel even sat down. Today, she had brought juice boxes. "I brought apple today," she announced, handing him one like it was a gift of state. Daniel smiled as he accepted it. "Thank you, I didn't pack a lunch." "You never do," she said, matter of fact. "You always come empty." Daniel blinked. There was a deeper truth to that than she knew. "You know what's weird?" she asked, legs swinging again. "What?" "I don't feel sad when I sit here anymore, not even when I think of my dad." Daniel sipped his juice. "That's not weird, that's healing." "Healing's good, right?" "It's the best thing there is." She smiled, then launched into a long story about her day at school. A story that involved a glitter accident, a boy named Sammy who thought lizards could read, and a spelling test she forgot to study for. Daniel listened, really listened. It struck him how rarely anyone in his life spoke to him without needing something. Leela didn't want funding or approval. She didn't even want his name. She just wanted someone to listen. And so he did. Later that day, Maya arrived with less of her usual caution. She carried a plastic container of pasta salad and a folded blanket. There was something easier in her posture, her shoulders not quite as tense. "Thought I'd bring dinner to the park today," she said as she laid the blanket down on the grass near the bench. Daniel stood unsure. "Would you like me to give you both space?" Maya looked up, surprised. "Actually, we were hoping you'd stay." He blinked. "Are you sure?" "Leela said you're her favorite grown-up, tied with the cafeteria lady who gives extra fries." Daniel chuckled. "High praise." Maya handed him a fork and gestured to the blanket. He sat, awkward at first, then eased into the moment. They ate under the golden hues of a setting sun. Leela laughed as she ran circles around a tree, pretending it was a castle. Maya picked at her pasta, glancing at Daniel. "She likes you," she said softly. "I like her too," he replied. "I haven't seen her this light in well since her dad passed." Daniel nodded slowly. "How are you doing?" Maya blinked at him. "I'm surviving. I work the morning shift at the cafe and freelance web design at night. It's a lot, but she's worth it." Daniel studied her. There were faint lines under her eyes and calluses on her fingers, signs of a woman who worked harder than anyone should have to. And yet her spirit wasn't bitter, just tired. "You're doing a good job," he said, surprising even himself. She gave him a long look. "You don't even know me." "I know you show up, that counts." Their eyes held for a beat too long, until Leela came crashing back onto the blanket with a handful of wildflowers and a story about a bee that chased her. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they packed up. Leela climbed into Maya's arms, sleep already tugging at her eyes. Maya turned to Daniel. "Same time tomorrow." He nodded. "Same bench." She hesitated. "You don't have to keep doing this, you know, we're strangers." Daniel looked at Leela, already half asleep on her aunt's shoulder, one hand still clutching her bunny. "Not anymore," he said. That night back in his penthouse, Daniel walked through empty rooms filled with elegant furniture and walls that echoed when he breathed too deeply. He passed the untouched dinner on the kitchen counter and sat in the living room instead, pulling out a small notebook. Inside were scribbles. Diaz, his late wife, Olivia, had once jotted down for a foundation she wanted to start for children who lost parents. He hadn't opened it since her funeral. But tonight, he turned the page. And for the first time in a long time, he added something new. 3 days later, a winter chill rolled in early. The trees lost more leaves, and the sky carried that pale blue tone that hinted at coming frost. Daniel arrived at the park wearing a thick black coat, expecting the usual, Leela skipping around, Maya trailing with snacks or a folded blanket. But today, only Maya was there. She was pacing. Her cheeks were flushed from more than just the cold. "Daniel," she said quickly. "Hey, I'm sorry, we can't stay long. Leela's not feeling great." Immediately, Daniel's brows knit. "Is she okay?" "Just a cold, I think," Maya said. "But my apartment's heater broke last night. It's freezing in there. I've been using hot water bottles and layers, but it's not enough. I came to see if you'd seen the maintenance guy. He sometimes sits around the park entrance in the afternoons." Daniel stared at her. "Your building didn't fix it." "They're dragging their feet. It's not the best neighborhood for urgent repairs, she said, hugging her coat tighter. Anyway, I left Leela with a neighbor just for a few minutes. I should get back. Daniel didn't think, he just acted. Come stay at my place. Maya blinked, stunned. What? Just for the night, he added, sensing her hesitation. You said your apartment's freezing and Leela's already sick. My place is warm, big, empty. That's not Daniel. I can't just bring my niece to a stranger's penthouse. You know me now, he said gently. Besides, you can take the guest room, lock the door if it makes you feel better. I won't intrude. Maya opened her mouth, then closed it. Her pride was warring with her instincts, but when she thought of Leela coughing under layers of blankets in a freezing room, the decision became simple. I'll grab her things. That night, Daniel's penthouse finally felt lived in. He gave them the guest suite, plush, spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked over the city. He brought up soup from the kitchen, extra blankets, and even dug out a book of bedtime stories Olivia used to read aloud. Leela snuggled into the guest bed, her cheeks still pink but calmer now, soothed by the warmth. Daniel stood in the doorway with Maya as the child drifted to sleep. She likes the stars, he said, pointing out the large glass window. Olivia used to call this room the moon room because of the view. Maya smiled faintly. It's beautiful and warm. Daniel offered a tired grin. It's the least I can do. They walked back to the kitchen in silence. There, Maya turned to him. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You've been kind, and I don't want you to feel obligated. I don't, he interrupted softly. You and Leela, I look forward to seeing you every day. You've given me something I didn't realize I needed. Maya leaned against the counter, like a reason to smile again. He nodded. They stood there for a while, two strangers bound by grief, and the strange ways healing makes people collide. I lost my husband 2 years ago, Maya said quietly. Leela doesn't remember him much, she was so little, but she remembers how it felt. That's why the park was special. He used to sit with her on that bench every Saturday. Daniel looked down, processing. She talks about him like he's still around, he said. She does that with people she trusts, Maya replied, and apparently you're one of them. Daniel felt something shift inside him, a soft melting, a loosening of the grief he'd carried alone for so long. She asked if she could stay here forever, Maya added, then laughed under her breath. I told her that wasn't how life works. Daniel smiled too. Maybe not, but I'm glad she asked. Later, Daniel wandered through the silent halls of his home. He passed Olivia's old art studio, still untouched. Easels in the corner, a palette left out like she might return to finish her last painting. He hesitated, then opened the door. The room smelled faintly of turpentine and lavender. He walked in and stood in front of the unfinished canvas. A field of wildflowers, half-finished, sunlight streaking in from an imagined horizon. Daniel touched the edge of the canvas. For the first time in months, he didn't feel like breaking down. He felt like breathing. Meanwhile, Maya sat beside Leela in the guest bed, staring at the ceiling. She should have felt overwhelmed. This wasn't their life. They didn't belong in penthouses or rooms with starlight views. And yet, Daniel hadn't treated them like guests. He'd treated them like people who mattered. And in a world that moved so quickly, that kind of gentleness was rare. She turned to Leela, gently brushing her hair back. Do you like it here? She whispered. Leela nodded sleepily. It feels like Daddy's bench, but bigger. Maya kissed her forehead, heart full and aching. And for the first time in a long time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a detour. Maybe it was the beginning of something new. Morning sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, washing the guest room in a soft golden glow. Leela stirred first, her small limbs stretching under the thick comforter. Maya blinked awake a few seconds later, the unfamiliar ceiling disorienting her, until the memory of last night settled in like a warm blanket. Daniel's penthouse, the unexpected kindness, the stillness. She rolled out of bed, careful not to wake Leela, and tiptoed into the hallway. The smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted from the kitchen. She found Daniel already up, standing by the window with a mug in hand, dressed in a charcoal sweater and jeans that made him look less like a CEO and more like someone simply trying to feel human again. I figured you'd be up early, he said without turning. I'm surprised I slept, Maya replied. It's too peaceful in here. He chuckled lightly. It used to be too quiet, now it's just enough. She stepped closer. Thank you again for everything. Daniel looked at her and his expression softened. You don't have to thank me. You two being here, it's reminded me what it feels like to have a home. There was a pause. Maya hesitated, then asked, Do you ever go into her studio? He blinked. Last night was the first time since the funeral. Her breath caught slightly. Was it hard? Yes, he said honestly, but it didn't break me this time. I think it's because Leela said something the other day. Maya waited. She said Olivia was probably in heaven too, sitting with her dad, and that maybe they were happy we found each other. Maya felt her chest tighten. She sees the world in such forgiving way, he added. Maya smiled. She always has. Daniel set down his coffee. I want to show you something. They went into the study, a room with deep bookshelves and a small fireplace. Daniel opened a cabinet near the bottom and pulled out a wooden box, polished heavy with initials engraved on top. O.W. Olivia Walker. This was hers, he said. She called it her memory box. He placed it on the table and gently opened the lid. Inside were photos, ticket stubs, dried flowers, sketches, a handwritten note on folded parchment, a lock of hair tied with a pale blue ribbon. She kept everything that made her heart stir, Daniel murmured. Said it reminded her that time was a gift, not a guarantee. Maya leaned in, careful not to touch anything. There was a Polaroid of Daniel and Olivia at a street fair, faces smeared with cotton candy, a napkin with their initials and a heart, a tiny paper swan folded from a restaurant bill. She was whimsical, Maya said quietly. She was a storm, Daniel said. A kind one. She didn't wait for life to happen, she grabbed it. He reached into the box and pulled out the folded parchment. Slowly, he opened it. If I go first, the letter began, don't let this place swallow you. Don't sit in silence, thinking silence is safe. Love again, laugh loudly, cry when you must, but live, because you still can. And I'll be watching, probably judging your haircut, but watching with love. Daniel chuckled wetly and handed it to Maya. She read it slowly, eyes watering. She sounds like someone Leela would have adored. She would have loved Leela right back. A silence settled over them, not heavy but thoughtful. Then Daniel said, Would it be crazy if I asked you both to stay another night? Maya looked up. You're already doing too much. I want to, he said. I know it's temporary, but I like having you here. The quiet doesn't echo so much. Maya bit her lip. What happens when the heater's fixed? Daniel smiled sadly. I guess I'll go back to drinking coffee alone. She laughed gently. You're impossible. Persistent, he corrected. That's a CEO trait. Later that afternoon, Leela curled up in Olivia's old reading nook with a stack of children's books. Maya was helping in the kitchen when Daniel came in with a small sketch pad. I had a thought, he said, handing her the book. What if we help Leela make her own memory box? Maya's eyes lit up. You mean like Olivia S.? He nodded. Could be a way to give her roots in this new chapter, something beautiful to look back on. Maya opened the sketchpad. Inside were simple ideas jotted down, drawings, lists of favorite songs, pressed leaves, pages for memories with her mother and father. She'll love this, Maya whispered. Daniel said, I hope so. That night, Leela sat on the floor, cutting pictures from old magazines Daniel let her use. Maya helped her tape them into a shoebox covered in gold foil. There was a picture of the park bench, a sticker that said Hope, and a leaf she'd found on Daniel's balcony. What will you name your box? Maya asked. Leela thought, maybe, the Forever box. Daniel sat beside them. Why forever? Because I want to remember forever, Leela said simply. He felt something swell in his chest again. That same ache, but now accompanied by warmth. Leela carefully placed the first item inside. A Polaroid Daniel had printed for her earlier of them all smiling on the penthouse balcony. Her new bench. The week passed more quickly than any of them expected. What had started as a temporary refuge began to feel like a kind of sanctuary. Leela was blossoming, laughing louder, sleeping better, even humming to herself as she colored at the kitchen table. Maya, too, found herself easing into the rhythms of the penthouse. It wasn't luxury that comforted her. It was the sense of peace, the absence of grief's sharp edges. Daniel began working fewer hours, choosing instead to help Leela with her new, forever box. He taught her how to make shadow puppets in the hallway lights. He showed Maya how to use Olivia's old espresso machine, burning the milk twice before finally getting it right. It almost felt like a family. Until the doorbell rang. It was early evening, and Daniel was in the kitchen stirring spaghetti sauce. Leela sat cross-legged on the rug, singing softly to her stuffed bear. Maya opened the door and froze. Standing there in a sharp navy suit, hair sleeked back and smile too thin to be genuine, was Catherine Roth, Daniel's late wife's sister. "Catherine," Maya said, straightening, "you're early." Early, Catherine blinked, brushing past her into the hallway. "Was I expected?" Daniel stepped into view, frowning instantly. "Catherine, this is unexpected." "I was in town," she said coolly, looking around. Her eyes landed on Maya, then Leela. "And I thought I'd drop in. Seems I chose an interesting evening." Maya stepped protectively toward Leela. "Leela, sweetie, why don't you take Mr. Bear into your room?" Leela looked up at Daniel, then at the stranger with guarded eyes. "Okay." Once the child was gone, Catherine crossed her arms. "You have strangers living here now, Daniel." Daniel sighed. "They're not strangers, they're guests." Her voice dropped in volume, but not intensity. "Olivia's barely gone a year, and already you've turned her sanctuary into what? A halfway house." "That's enough," he said, jaw tightening. Maya swallowed hard. "Maybe I should." "No," Daniel said firmly. "Stay." Catherine's eyes sharpened. "Who is she?" "I'm Maya, and that was my daughter, Leela." "And why are you here?" "I met Daniel in the park," Maya said quietly. "My heater broke. He offered us a place to stay." Catherine laughed without humor. "And you accepted just like that?" "Catherine," Daniel said, voice steady but stern, "you don't get to judge what I do in my home. Not anymore." Her face flinched at that, but she quickly masked it. "Olivia left this place in your care, not to turn it into some kind of refuge for people you barely know." Daniel's voice lowered. "Olivia left me with a letter that said, 'Live again, love again.' I think she'd approve of this." There was a pause. Catherine's eyes burned, but her voice softened ever so slightly. "And what happens when they leave, Daniel? When the silence returns?" Daniel didn't answer right away. Maya looked at him. "We never asked to stay forever. I promise you, we'll go if it's causing problems." But Daniel stepped closer to her. "You're not the problem. This," he gestured between them, "this has been the most human I've felt in months." Catherine's gaze lingered on them. She seemed to see something in his face that unsettled her. "You're falling for her." Daniel didn't deny it. Maya's breath caught. Catherine took a step back, suddenly uncertain. "I hope you know what you're doing." He said nothing. She exhaled and turned toward the door. "Don't call me when this ends badly." And just like that, she left, her perfume hanging behind like a ghost. That night after Leela fell asleep, Maya sat beside Daniel on the balcony. The city pulsed below them, neon and infinite. Daniel rubbed his temples. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "She shouldn't have come at you like that." "She's grieving too," Maya said gently. "But I get it now. You and Olivia had something rare." "We did," he said, "but I think she'd want me to find something rare again." Maya looked up at him. "Even with someone like me?" He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Especially with someone like you." She leaned into his shoulder. "Do you regret letting us in?" she whispered. Daniel shook his head slowly. "No, you didn't just come in, you brought life with you." They sat in silence for a while, comfortable, easy, quiet, not from emptiness, but from presence. Down the hallway, the gold-foiled forever box sat by Leela's bed, its lid slightly ajar, holding a Polaroid, a sticker, a pressed leaf. And now a new sketch Daniel had added that morning. 3 stick figures on a park bench. Hand in hand. The moonlight poured softly into the kitchen as Maya poured herself a glass of water. It had been 2 days since Catherine's unexpected visit, but her words still lingered in the corners of the penthouse like smoke that wouldn't clear. Daniel had grown quieter since, not cold, just cautious. Maya felt it, and it made her heart ache more than she was ready to admit. She sat by the window, watching the skyline, tracing the rim of her glass with her finger. Behind her, footsteps approached, soft, bare, familiar. "You're up late," Daniel said gently, slipping into the chair across from her. So are you, she replied with a tired smile. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Daniel spoke. You're not just a woman I found in the park. Maya froze. You've got layers I haven't seen yet, and I think you're carrying something you're not saying. Maya swallowed hard. Daniel. He leaned forward, voice tender. I'm not prying, but if we're going to move forward, if there's even a chance, I need to know who you really are. Maya looked down. Her fingers trembled slightly as she gripped her glass. I've never told anyone the whole thing, she whispered. Not even Leela. You can tell me, he said. She nodded slowly, heart pounding. My husband, Leela's father, died in a car crash 3 years ago, she began. He was driving home from his night shift at the hospital. A drunk driver ran a red light. Daniel exhaled. I'm so sorry. Maya nodded, blinking back tears. We lost everything. The insurance money barely covered his funeral. We had no savings, no home in our name. I moved into a shelter, then got a job at a cafe, scraping by. I didn't want Leela to feel that pain, so I tried to make it an adventure. She paused. But there's more, she whispered. Something I've never admitted out loud. Daniel leaned in, waiting patiently. My husband and I were fighting that night. He called me before he left the hospital, and I didn't answer. We had a stupid argument about money, about Leela's school shoes. I told him to stop controlling everything. He told me to stop spending. It escalated. I hung up. I was angry, and then he died. The tears came now, silent and fierce. Maya covered her face with her hands. I blamed myself, she sobbed. I still do some days. Daniel stood and crossed to her, kneeling by her chair. He gently pulled her hands away from her face. Maya, that's not your fault. I let him drive angry. You argued that's human. What happened wasn't on you. It was on that driver, not you. Her lip trembled. I try to be strong for Leela, but inside I'm still broken, and I'm scared to let you care for us, because what if I ruin everything again? Daniel's voice was firm but full of compassion. You didn't ruin anything. You survived. You protected your daughter. You brought light into my home when I didn't think I could feel anything again. She looked at him, searching his eyes. You still want us here? She asked. More than ever, he said. She collapsed into his arms, crying openly now. Relief, guilt, hope, everything she'd bottled up for years. And Daniel held her like a man holding something precious, something irreplaceable. When her sobs quieted, he brushed her hair back and whispered, You're safe here. So is Leela. And no matter how messy the past was, we get to build something new, together. The next morning, Leela ran into the kitchen with messy hair and sleepy eyes. Mr. Daniel, she said. Yes, sunshine. Can we make pancakes shaped like stars today? He chuckled, we can try. Maya, watching from the doorway, smiled, her first real smile in a long time. For the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving. She was living. And maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to heal. Leela woke up to the smell of vanilla and cinnamon wafting from the kitchen. She blinked her eyes open, stretched beneath the warm blanket, and reached for her plush bear. A smile curled on her face. It was her birthday. She rushed into the hallway, tiny feet padding across the polished floor. The penthouse felt warmer today, brighter. Mommy, she squealed as she turned the corner. Maya was in the kitchen, whisking batter, her hair tied up messily. Daniel stood beside her, flipping pancakes with exaggerated precision. Happy birthday, my little starlight, Maya said, dropping the whisk and kneeling to wrap her daughter in a tight hug. Leela giggled. I smelled the pancakes. Daniel turned, holding up a golden star-shaped pancake on a spatula. I present to you the birthday breakfast of champions. Leela clapped her hands. You remembered. Maya exchanged a glance with Daniel, touched. Of course we did. Leela sat at the table as they served her. There were star-shaped pancakes, fruit shaped into hearts, and a small cup of hot chocolate with whipped cream and sprinkles. As she ate, her eyes sparkled with excitement. I don't want any presents, she declared between bites. Maya blinked. No presents. Leela shook her head. Just one thing. Daniel leaned in. What's that? I want us all to go to the park, where I met you. Maya's eyes softened. Really, why the park? Because, Leela said solemnly, That's where I found you, Mr. Daniel. It's like Daddy sent you. I want to thank him up in heaven. Daniel's throat tightened. Then the park it is. By midday, the three of them walked hand in hand toward the quiet corner of the park where Daniel and Leela had first met. Leela wore a soft, yellow dress, the one she said made her feel like sunshine. Daniel carried a small bouquet of daisies in his hand, Leela's choice. Those were Daddy's favorite, she'd said, picking them from the garden box earlier. He said daisies were the happiest flowers. As they reached the bench, Leela paused. Can I talk to Daddy now? Maya knelt beside her. Of course, baby. Leela stepped forward, placed the daisies on the bench, and closed her eyes. Hi, Daddy, she whispered to the sky. I turned 7 today. I miss you a lot, but it's okay, 'cause I think you sent someone to us. His name is Daniel. He's kind, and he makes Mommy smile. I like him. He's not you, but I think he wants to take care of us. Maya's tears streamed silently. Daniel stood frozen, overwhelmed by emotion. And guess what? Leela added, opening her eyes. I'm not scared anymore. She turned around and ran back into Maya's arms. I think Daddy heard me. Daniel cleared his throat, then lowered himself beside them. Leela, he said gently, you're the bravest person I know. She beamed, even braver than a CEO. Daniel laughed, way braver. Later that evening, the penthouse buzzed with soft jazz and twinkling lights. Daniel had pulled out every stop. He'd hired a small catering team, decorated the terrace with balloons and fairy lights, and even set up a chocolate fountain. But he kept it intimate, just the three of them. Maya stood on the terrace, watching Leela dance barefoot to the music. Daniel approached with 2 glasses of sparkling apple cider. You did all this, she whispered, touched. I just wanted her to feel celebrated. She's never had a birthday like this. He turned to her, neither have I. They clinked glasses and watched Leela twirl beneath the stars. As the evening wore on and Leela drifted to sleep curled on the couch with a cupcake in hand, Maya and Daniel sat beside her, sharing a blanket. She's changed everything, Daniel murmured. She has that effect on people, Maya smiled. She found you when I didn't even believe people like you existed. He looked at her, more serious now. I don't want this to be temporary. Maya blinked. What do you mean? I know we're still healing, but Maya, I want to be part of your lives, not just as someone passing through. I want to build something real with you, with Leela. Maya's breath caught. I'm not asking you for an answer tonight, he continued, but I want you to know where I stand. The city lights twinkled behind him, but Maya's eyes were only on his. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I, he whispered. And still, they leaned into each other, forehead to forehead, anchored in the quiet strength of something undeniable. 3 weeks later, the penthouse no longer felt like a bachelor's monument to loneliness. It had transformed, still modern and elegant, but softer, warmer. Daniel stood in front of the mirror, straightening his tie. He looked different, not just in appearance, but in spirit. The grief that had once rooted him in silence was still there, but now it sat beside something else, hope. Behind him, Maya appeared, adjusting her earrings. You're nervous, she said with a knowing smile. I'm about to meet your mother for the first time. Nervous doesn't even begin to cover it. Maya laughed and came closer, her hands gently smoothing his collar. She's going to love you. He raised an eyebrow. She's already suspicious that we're moving too fast. She's suspicious of everyone, Maya said, but she'll see what I see. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. And what's that? That you're not trying to replace anyone, you're just here with us fully. Downstairs, Leela was sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by sketchbooks and colored pencils. I made something, she said as soon as Daniel entered. Oh, he knelt beside her. She held up a picture. It was childlike, messy, but clear, a drawing of 3 people holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. It's us, she explained. Me, Mommy, and you, and see, there's Daddy up in the sky with wings. Daniel stared at the drawing, his throat thick. It's beautiful. He's smiling, Leela said, pointing, because I told him you were nice. Daniel looked at her, overwhelmed by the gravity of such innocent trust. Thank you, Leela. She reached over and took his hand. I'm glad you sat on our bench that day. So am I, he whispered. Maya's mother, Mrs. Harper, was stern at first, polite but guarded. She scrutinized Daniel with the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen her daughter break and rebuild more than once. But as the evening wore on, and Daniel patiently answered her questions, about his late wife, about grief, about how he planned to respect Maya's boundaries and honor her past, her expression softened. After dinner, she pulled Maya aside. "He's not like the others," she murmured. Maya smiled. "No, he's not." "Do you love him?" "I'm learning how to," Maya admitted honestly. "And he's patient with me, with Leela, with all of it." Mrs. Harper squeezed her hand. "Then give it a chance, just take your time." 1 month later, they moved into a new house, a place neither haunted by the past nor crowded by luxury. It was near the park, close to Maya's work and Leela's school. A white picket fence framed the yard. Inside, the furniture was a mix of Daniel's minimalist taste and Maya's cozy warmth. On the first night, they all sat on the floor, eating pizza from the box, surrounded by unopened moving cartons. Leela curled into Daniel's side, giggling at something on TV. "This feels right," Maya whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her. "It is right." Weeks turned into months. Daniel began investing in charities focused on grief support and single mothers. Maya returned to her art part-time, painting again for the first time since her husband died. And Leela, she blossomed. Her teachers spoke of her growing confidence, her brightness. One day, she stood in front of her class and gave a presentation titled, "My Two Dads, One in Heaven, One Who Sat on a Bench." Daniel and Maya attended, sitting side by side, their hands intertwined. "She's incredible," Daniel said afterward, eyes misty. "She's our heartbeat," Maya replied. On the anniversary of her husband's passing, Maya visited the cemetery. She brought daisies. She knelt down, fingers brushing the engraved name. "I kept thinking moving forward meant letting go," she whispered. "But it didn't. It just meant making room. You'll always be part of me, part of Leela. And Daniel, he's not trying to be you, but he loves her, he loves us." The wind blew softly, rustling the trees. "I hope you're at peace," she said, placing the flowers gently down, "because we're finally getting there." That evening, they returned to the same park bench where it all began. Daniel sat on one side, Maya on the other. Leela stood between them, holding both their hands. "Do you think Daddy can still hear me?" she asked, gazing at the sky. "I think," Daniel said, "he never stopped." Leela smiled. "Can I ask you something?" she added shyly. "Anything," Maya said. "Can we keep sitting on this bench every year on my birthday, just to say hi?" Maya looked at Daniel. He nodded. "We'll be here," he promised, "every year." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across their faces, the three of them sat in quiet peace. One family, forged by loss, held together by love, and forever bound by the words of a little girl who changed everything with a question. "Can I sit here?"